I'm Dr. Roland Carlstedt. I'll be presenting on the critical moments in athletes' profile models of peak performance, psychological factors driving doping. Who is more or less likely to dope and why? Predictive psychological and behavioral measures associated with differential performance outcomes when under pressure form the basis of a validated peak performance explanatory model that may be applicable to psychological etiology of doping. There's a need for preemptive psychological assessment and risk stratification for determining doping likelihood. The importance of testing validated predictive performance and behavioral models to determine if the most psychologically vulnerable athletes are more likely to dope is needed. That's a necessary first step in the subsequent development of targeted psychological intervention protocols to prevent doping. In this presentation, the athlete's profile model measures, which include hypnotic susceptibility, neuroticism, and repressive coping, are considered in the context of mediation of or decision to engage in doping. With athletes who possess the so-called worst athlete profile that is marked by the inability to perform up to peak physical and psychological potential being most likely to resort to doping. This subset of athletes, even if physically and technically more proficient than athletes with the ideal athlete's profile, cognizant of their mental frailty as competitive and life pressures increase, are hypothesized to dope in hopes of not only gaining a physical edge, but especially a mental toughness edge. An investigation in the planning stage using a retrospective design will attempt to locate documented dopers and have them take validated questionnaire-self report-based tests to establish their athlete's profile. It is predicted that dopers will overwhelmingly exhibit the worst athlete's profile, consisting of high hypnotic susceptibility, high neuroticism, and low repressive coping. Consistent with this investigator's finding that the worst athlete profile athletes fail to perform at peak levels as situational criticality increased. That is the highest level of critical moments. The validated critical moments in athletes' profile model has identified an athlete vulnerability profile consisting of these three traits that have been shown to interact and negatively impact performance as pressure and stress increases. The model emanates from the realm of behavioral medicine and is highly predictive in terms of who is most likely to experience pervasive negative cognitions, chronic sympathetic nervous system hyperactivation at baseline, and hypersympathetic nervous system responses to stressors. Chronic sympathetic nervous system hyperactivation is associated with substance abuse and is hypothesized to contribute to athlete doping and should be routinely tested for. I'm now showing you a screen that basically depicts the mechanisms and dynamics and characteristics associated with this particular profile. So the athlete's stress vulnerability profile is associated with chronic stress and a fear of failure, pervasive negative intrusive thoughts, and as mentioned, hypersympathetic nervous system activation. It puts athletes at greater susceptibility to buying into performance myths associated with doping that may not hold up under empirical scrutiny. It also is related to the drive for success, no matter the cost and the risks. So meaning that individuals who exhibit this profile are under pressure to achieve, and they would tend to take risks and not be cognizant of future consequences. And that would also include the risk of consequences from including or taking or attempting to cheat. The model has been validated empirically in the context of conventional peak performance, meaning pressure performance using a subject pool of over 1,200 NCAA athletes, and a clear vulnerability profile emerged in which athletes who are high in hypnotic susceptibility, high neuroticism, and low in repressive coping were under the most baseline stress and performed the worst enormously as pressure went up, as critical moments came up. So the hypothesis is that athletes who exhibit this profile are going to be under a constant stress state, a state of wanting to achieve and take risks and do whatever is necessary to attain some sort of goal as an athlete, which may not be attainable on the basis of purely technical skills, although that doesn't necessarily preclude athletes who do have top technical skills from also wanting to dope, but they just have this pressure or stress or motivation to want to even go higher. And the myth is, though, that doping will always lead to stellar performance, and that's not the case. If you analyze doping statistics a little more critically and take variations of doping success into account. So we expect this model to hold up and to be a first step in uh, explicating or explaining why people dope, and that's been an aspect of the doping equation that uh, has been understudied, and we think assessing using this profile should augment traditional biochemical attempts to catch dopers. So this is more of a investigative assessment model that preemptively attempts to predict and determine who is more likely to dope, and then possibly intervene to steer somebody away from doping. So thank you very much.